The applause stopped. 200 employees in that crowded ballroom fell silent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns turned to stare at one man standing frozen near the Christmas tree. Harold Mitchell, 54 years old, still wearing his gray janitor's uniform. Steak sauce dripping down his chest where Richard Davenport had just thrown a half-eaten filet mignon. "You think you can steal from M.Y. Company?" Richard's voice echoed through the ballroom. His face was red. His breath reeked of whiskey. He pointed his finger at Harold like a weapon. "I saw you, taking food from the garbage like some kind of animal." Harold's weathered hands, calloused and scarred from decades of hard work, slowly wiped the meat from his shirt. He opened his mouth to explain. "Security." 2 guards grabbed Harold's arms. His mop clattered to the marble floor. "Get this thief out of my building," Richard commanded. "And make sure everyone watches." Harold was dragged past rows of silent executives. Not one person moved. Not one person spoke up. His employee badge was ripped from his chest and thrown in the trash. The glass doors slammed behind him. Harold stood alone in the December snow. The party lights glowed behind him. His breath hung visible in the frozen air. 23 years of service, ended over a leftover steak someone else had already thrown away. Harold walked through his apartment door at midnight. The place was small and dimly lit. Wallpaper peeling from the walls. A single lamp glowing on a wooden table. And there, by the window, sat his wife Evelyn in her wheelchair. An oxygen tube ran to her nose. She looked up with tired but loving eyes. "You're home early," she whispered. Harold knelt beside her wheelchair. He took her hand in his. His jaw trembled. He couldn't say the words. But Evelyn understood without being told. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Oh, Harold, you see." Evelyn had been fighting pulmonary fibrosis for 8 years. The treatments weren't covered by insurance. Prescription bottles lined the kitchen counter. Medical bills stamped, past due, sat in stacks on the table. Every extra shift Harold worked. Every birthday he missed. Every ounce of dignity he swallowed from men like Richard Davenport. It was all for her. That leftover steak from the party wasn't for him. It was for Evelyn. Harold had been in the company kitchen earlier that night, carefully wrapping uneaten filet mignon in napkins, looking over his shoulder, not like a thief, like a husband desperate to give his sick wife one good meal. He never stole a single thing that wasn't already destined for the dumpster. But what nobody knew, what Richard Davenport never bothered to notice, was what Harold kept in that worn leather folder from his locker. For 6 years, while mopping floors after midnight, Harold had been perfecting something, an industrial cleaning solution. Non-toxic, incredibly powerful, made from ingredients that cost pennies. He'd filed the patent with his own savings, and Davenport Industries had never even noticed. That night, Harold sat at his kitchen table with his head in his hands. The leather folder sat in front of him. He looked at Evelyn sleeping in the next room, then back at the folder. He could have given up. Most people would have. He endured years of humiliation for one heartbreaking reason: to keep his wife alive. If you believe hard work should be rewarded, tap the like button. Because what Harold did next will restore your faith. 1 week later, Harold put on a thrift store suit and walked into a bank. Rejected. He tried another bank. Rejected again. He stood before a group of local business owners at a community center, holding up a bottle of his cleaning solution. Some laughed. Most ignored him. Nobody believed in a janitor with a dream. 3 months later, Harold converted his garage into a workshop. He mixed chemicals by hand while Evelyn sat in her wheelchair beside him, labeling each bottle with a handwritten sticker that read, "Mitchell's Miracle Clean." They started with nothing. Harold went door to door. Small businesses, diners, laundromats. Most doors closed in his face. But one didn't. An older woman who owned a family restaurant tried his cleaner on a grease-stained stove. Her eyes went wide. She reached for her wallet. Word spread. Harold loaded cases of bottles into his old pickup truck. Rain poured down, soaking his clothes. He didn't stop. 2 years later, he had a small warehouse, employees filling orders, a distributor shaking his hand. Mitchell's Miracle Clean was now in grocery stores across 3 states. 5 years later, Harold walked through the doors of his own modern office building. Mitchell Solutions was etched on the glass. Employees greeted him by name as he passed. And beside him, walking slowly with a cane instead of sitting in a wheelchair, was Evelyn. Healthier now. The treatments had worked. They held hands as they walked together. Meanwhile, across town, Davenport Industries was falling apart. A for sale sign sat on the lawn. The windows were dark. News headlines declared the company bankrupt after years of mismanagement. Richard Davenport had spent a decade making enemies, cutting corners, and squeezing every penny from the workers who kept that place running. The empire his father built crumbled under his ego. Now Richard sat in a cramped apartment, pouring whiskey at noon. The same arrogant face, now bloated and tired. 10 years after that Christmas party, Harold's lawyer set a folder on his desk. "Sir, Davenport Industries is officially on the market. Every asset, the building, the brand, everything." Harold picked up a pen and signed without hesitation. "Buy it." The same corporate building from 10 years ago now had new signage being installed. A Mitchell Solutions company. A Blacktown car pulled up to the entrance. Harold stepped out. His hair was silver now. His suit was tailored. His shoes were polished. But his eyes were the same, kind and steady. Employees gathered in the lobby, whispering and staring. Some recognized him. Harold walked through those glass doors for the first time in a decade. The same marble floor he used to mop. The same chandelier he used to dust. Now he owned every inch of it. A young assistant approached nervously. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a man here." He demanded to see the new owner. "He says he used to run this company." Harold's expression remained calm. No anger, just resolve. "Send him in." The boardroom doors opened. Richard Davenport walked in. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He was a shadow of the man who once ruled this building. He stopped cold when he saw Harold. Recognition washed over his face. Then disbelief. Then fear. "You?" Harold sat at the head of the table, the same chair Richard once occupied. "Hello, Richard." Richard's hands trembled. He steadied himself on a chair. "This is impossible. You were just a janitor." Harold reached into his briefcase. He pulled out the worn leather folder and slid it across the table. "I was never just a janitor." Richard opened the folder. His face went pale as he saw the patent, the formulas, the acquisition documents. "That cleaning solution your company used for the last 10 years, Harold said. "The one that saved you millions before the lawsuit started. I invented it. In your basement. While you were upstairs drinking champagne." Richard sank into a chair. The arrogance drained from his face. "You built your comeback? On what I threw away." Harold stood and walked toward Richard. Not with rage. With dignity. "You threw away a lot of things, Richard. Your employees. Your integrity. Your father's legacy." Richard's lip quivered. His voice cracked. "I need a job. Please. I have nothing." The man who once threw food at Harold's chest was now begging for mercy. Watch what Harold did next, because this is where the story takes its final turn. Harold looked down at Richard for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "You want a job?" Richard nodded. "Desperate. Broken. Then earn it. Like I did." Harold slid a piece of paper across the table. "A job application. Start in the mailroom. Minimum wage. No special treatment. You show up on time. You work hard. You treat every person in this building with respect, from the CEO to the janitor. And maybe, in a few years, you'll remember what your father tried to teach you." Richard stared at the application. Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time in his life, genuine humility crossed his face. "Why?" he asked. "After everything I did to you, why would you give me a chance?" Harold stood and walked toward the window. He looked out at the city below. "Because someone gave me a chance once. A customer who believed in a janitor with a bottle of homemade cleaner. Grace isn't earned, Richard. It's given. and it's up to you what you do with it. Richard sat alone in that boardroom for a long time. Then, slowly, he picked up the pen and signed the application. 1 month later, Richard wore a mailroom uniform and pushed a cart through the building. When an employee dropped a stack of papers, Richard bent down and helped pick them up. Harold watched from the hallway. He gave a slight nod. Then he walked away. Today, a bronze plaque hangs in the company lobby. It reads, "Dedicated to every worker who was told they weren't enough. You are Harold Mitchell." He could have crushed the man who humiliated him. Instead, he offered him something money can't buy, a second chance. Richard learned that day that you can inherit a company, but you cannot inherit character. What would you have done in Harold's shoes? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. My grandfather used to say, "The measure of a man isn't how he treats those above him. It's how he treats those below." Harold Mitchell was never below anyone. He just hadn't risen yet.